Very good evening to you. So, we made you await a little longer to let you know who is this amazing personality who is joining us. We did know that it is, of course, none other than Dr. Palitha Kohona, His Excellency to the Embassy of China, and then, of course, let me not go into details. I will keep that curiosity awake, right? So, with that, a warm welcome, all of you who is joining us today to another webinar that we get the exposure to all our students who would be having a lot of experiences all this while. And of course, we will have the opportunity to get your concerns, get your experiences expanded as well. So a warm welcome to all of you. And of course, before starting the day, we do have chairman who would want to share a few information and of course a few important points to us. So our chairman for APIT, Mr. Bandula Igodage. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Kaushali. Hello, Doctor. Thank you very much, Dr. Palitha Kohona. On behalf of Mr. Roshan Igodage, our CEO of APIT, Board of Directors, staff and students, very warmly welcome you, sir. Indeed, it is a great honor that you accept to address to our students, even when you are flying to China tomorrow. So this is a great honor. So it means the commitment that you made, and it shows the real interest that you have towards the students. I mean, it's a key thing that all the students of APIT are waiting to listen to you, hear you. So that's a great thing that you have taken. Firstly, on behalf of APIT, congratulations for your new assignment. We have the highest confidence of your capability on handling both political and trade diplomacy for Mother Sri Lanka in China. So we as a APIT, we ensure quality education, as you know that. We inspire love to learn and to ensure lifelong learning for all our students and also staff as well. We want to expose the leaders like you to our students as part of our journey in leadership and skill development. APIT build leaders with the academic excellence. So, Doctor, the main objective is that you are here, people and the students will follow you and they would listen to you. We inspire them to take all the better learning from you as a leader. So we are in the journey of giving leadership skill to our students and the entire staff. So Doctor, thank you very much being with us. Dr. Rohanta, once again, you take over to you, Dr. Rohanta. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Kaushal.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and appreciate sincerely for the kind words expressed. Dr. Kohona is a household name in Sri Lanka. He was the Secretary Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka from 2006 to 2009. He then became the permanent representative of Sri Lanka to the UN in New York till 2015. He was the former secretary to the Secretariat for Coordinating the Peace Process when he was actually my boss. He also led the government delegation to Oslo for talks with the LTTE. In 2013, Dr. Kohona was elected chair of the UN General Assembly, 6th Committee Legal. He was the co-chair of the UN Working Group on Biological Diversity Beyond National Jurisdiction and the chair of the UN Committee on Israel Practices in the Occupied Arab Territories. He has an LLB in Honours from the University of Sri Lanka, an LLM in International Trade Law from the Australian National University, and a doctorate from Cambridge University, UK. His thesis for his doctorate, The Regulation of International Trade Through Law, was subsequently published by Clover, Netherlands. Dr. Kohona is Attorney of Law of the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka. Doctor is, apart from all this, is a perfect gentleman. I worked with Doctor across almost 2.5 to 3 years between 2007 and 2009. And it was a wonderful experience, the manner in which he leads a team, the way in which he develops people. And Dr. Kohona, over to you, sir, who will talk to us about building trade between countries during the pandemic. Over to you,
Sorry,
sir.
Dr. Rohanta. Sorry, Dr. That was a little disruption. You missed one part, one line. I would to add that thing. Dr. Kohona is a simple, humble man with the foot in the ground. So I want to add that profile also to him so that we know.
Thank you very much, Bandula. Over to you, Dr. Kohona. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rohanta. I remember those difficult days when we worked together. When, there were bombs exploding all over the country, and there was this urge to bring this conflict to an end so that the country would be at peace. I think to an extent we achieved that, because today the country is at peace since 2009. And between 2009 and the years that followed, the economy boomed. You can see that by the number of skyscrapers which came up in Colombo during that short period. I still recall Colombo before 2009. It was just a quiet, not really quiet, but a low-key Asian capital, but no longer. Now we have more ambitious plans as a country, with the port city ready to take off, and many other establishments already created in our capital. But there are problems. As we know, our economy has been facing a serious challenge over the last few years, particularly since 2019, after the Easter Sunday bombings. Then, unfortunately, as we were almost recovering from that, we had COVID-19 damaging all the hopes that we had built in order to get the country moving. So now we have, as they say, we've been faced with a double whammy, the April 19 bombings and then the COVID-19. Now, where do we go from here? We need, as a country, we need to move forward rapidly in the economic sphere. We need to create our infrastructure. We need to develop our trade as much as possible, exports. The government has expressed a clear interest in expanding our exports, because they have recognized, the government has recognized, that exports will be essential for Sri Lanka to move ahead, especially with the constraints imposed by COVID-19. We need inward investments to get the country moving again. We need investments in our infrastructure. We need our investments in our industries. And we also need investments for the purpose of getting our exports moving again. And then on top of it, and this is something that we had planned for earlier, to make tourism a major focus of our economic revival. Unfortunately, because of the Easter Sunday bombings and now COVID-19, tourism has almost died out completely, not only in Sri Lanka, but all over the world. So one of my responsibilities as I take over the position of ambassador in China would be to encourage Chinese businesses to consider Sri Lanka as a favorable destination for their external investments. Now, we just had the budget being presented to Parliament, and there are many elements in it that would encourage investors to come to this country. Because one of the things that we have to do is to create an environment of confidence in our economy. It's only where there is an environment of confidence that you are able to encourage foreign investors to come in. I believe that the budget has done that. There is now a guarantee that policies will not be changed in the next 5 years, at least. Hopefully they will stay the same for more than 5 years, so that those who bring in funds to this country will have the confidence that the rules of the playing fields, rules of the game will not be changed halfway through the game. This is one of the problems we have in this country. Policies have been adopted in the past, then modified, sometimes reversed completely, which gave no confidence to investors to place their money in this country, in this economy. And this has been a major problem. But now we have a government which has said categorically that the key policy platforms will not be modified, will not be changed over the next 5 years. But sometimes we may have to do that. I mean, it's natural. We may be confronted by some unknown factor which may require revision of policy. But by and large, I believe that we have the guarantee the government will not change policies, will not reverse policies willy-nilly over the next 5 years. And that's an important thing. And then, of course, we also need to market ourselves better. Rohanta, you are a marketer, and you will recognize the importance of not only possessing the wherewithal, but also marketing what we have to the world. The world has options. There are many other places to which investors can go and to which they are welcome with open arms. We need to create that image of a Sri Lanka which welcomes foreign investors with open arms, not with suspicion, not with antagonism, not with confrontation, but with open arms. Not in order to take away the countries from us, but in order to assist us, in order to move to another phase of our development. That's one of the, I mean, it's very important to recognize that as a people, we can't stay where we are forever. We need to move ahead. Many other countries which were in our position 30 or 40 years ago are now streaks ahead of us. Singapore, for example, 40 years ago, it was probably in the same position as Sri Lanka. Now it's competing with the best in the world for the top place. Even countries like Malaysia, Thailand, and others around us are doing so well. Their economies are booming. If not for COVID, they would have been doing even better. Sri Lanka has not done even a fraction of what they have done. And this is an embarrassment to an extent. So we need to, in order to achieve a better place in the world, we need to have stability in our policies. We need to create that reassurance. Sri Lanka is a good place to invest in. And then, of course, we need to market ourselves much, much better than we have done so far. We have a literate population, a welcoming population. As they say, we are a people with a permanent smile. And there is something that can attract the world, can be attractive to the world. We have resources that can be used for exports and for creating wealth. And all this put together, I think we have everything that needs to be there, much more than Singapore or anyone else. But we need to get them organized, get ourselves organized, market ourselves better, and attract more FDI. Then the other thing, other plank on which I would like to work on as we, over the next year or two or more, is trade, especially with China. With China, we have a massive negative trade balance. China exports something like $5 billion, mind you, $5 billion dollars worth of products to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka manages with great difficulty to export less than 300 million, which is a huge, inexplicable trade imbalance. We need to do something about it. I think we need to market our products, introduce our products to the Chinese marketplace. And this has to be done professionally and with care, with a lot of thinking. We have many things that we can sell in the Chinese market. And we need to identify those items and project them into the Chinese marketplace. For example, let me take tea, our traditional backstop. When everything else fails, tea is still there. In 2010, we exported 1 million kilograms of black tea, our tea, to China, Ceylon chai. Today, we export 10 million kilograms. It's a tenfold increase in a short period of time. And many exporters believe that this figure can be improved tremendously. In fact, I've heard one or two say that If the Chinese thirst for good Ceylon tea grows at the same rate, there may come a day sooner than later where we won't be able to satisfy the Chinese demand, because it's a product that is selling well. It's a product that the Chinese like. What do we do about this? Again, the same thing. We need to project what we have. We need to market our product better, and also market it to the Chinese in a way that they would like to have it. The Chinese, for example, these days, they do not go for cheap products. They go for valuable products. We still seem to think in the same way that we thought when we were selling tea to the British. Put $7 worth of tea into $1 worth of carton packaging and put it on a shelf, and it will go, it will sell. The Chinese are not interested in that sort of marketing. It would be far better to put the $7 worth of tea into a $50 package and sell it to the Chinese. The Chinese will go for the valuable or the more expensive item than the cheaper item. This has been revealed in survey after survey. The Chinese mentality now is different, very different, in the sense that they would go for luxury brands, luxury products than any other people that you know of. Rohan, you know that China is the biggest market for French luxury products at the moment. French luxury products sell better in China than even in France. The champagnes, the cognacs, the Louis Vuitton bags, the Chanel's, perfumes, etc. They sell much better in China than in France itself or any of the other Western markets. So this is what we should be targeting. We should be taking our products onto a marketplace that is now looking for luxury products, luxury brands. We need to brand ourselves better. It's not only tea, we have coconut products. In fact, the other day, I was given a can of coconut milk, which is made in China for drinking purposes. You drink it like Coke or 7-Up or whatever, similar product, or fruit juice, but it's very, very popular in China. We need to look for niche areas like that and market our products. I mean, you have to remember that China has 1.3 billion, 1.4 billion people. And this week, China announced to the world that it has eliminated poverty. There are no poor people in China anymore. There is also, in addition to not having any poor people, 700 million of the Chinese population is now classified as middle class, which basically means there are 700 million people with surplus spending power. We need to try and get them to spend that surplus on Sri Lankan products rather than on products from elsewhere. We have an excellent niche opening up because of the confrontation between the US and China, the confrontation between the US and Australia, the barriers that are coming up between China and those countries would necessarily mean there are openings being created for countries like Sri Lanka to step in, especially given the very close relationship we have managed to build up between the two countries. We need to work on that. And then another element I would like to talk about is tourism. Of course, at the moment, global tourism is dead, but it's not going to stay dead for much longer. There will come a point when the airports will open up, the doors will open, and tourism will, slowly at first, but surely it will resume and resurrect itself. And the biggest source of global tourism in 2019 was China, 169 million. I emphasize millions, 169 million Chinese traveled out of their country. And we need only a fraction of that number to visit Sri Lanka, and many of our economic problems will be resolved, not only due to the cash that they will bring in, but all the jobs that they will create in the service industry, in the production industry, and generally it will in the hotel industry, etc. This will be a game changer for the Sri Lankan economy if we can attract 1 million Chinese tourists. At least in 2018, the last year, which is significant for us from a tourist sense, only 265,000 Chinese came here. I find this incredible that when 26 million Chinese visited Thailand, 4 million Chinese visited Singapore, and Singapore's population is only slightly more than that. We managed to get, with great difficulty, 265,000. There's something missing in the way that we marketed ourselves to the Chinese, the way we projected ourselves to the Chinese, and the way we presented ourselves as a desirable destination to go to. We need to do much more in that respect. And it's a guaranteed source of tourism, because the 169 million now hemmed in because of COVID-19 must surely be itching to go somewhere when the doors open up. The coming summer, I would say, would be the beginning of a big flood of middle-class Chinese with tremendous spending power moving around to destinations around the world. And we need to think of how we can attract them. Market ourselves better, especially in the electronic medium, because the Chinese now search the web for almost everything, things that they wish to buy, places they wish to travel, etc. We need to get on the Chinese websites and market ourselves much more than what we do now. And then, of course, there is a feeling in this country, especially in the middle classes, including myself, that if you speak English, you can conquer the world. I think we should think again, because 1.4 billion Chinese, hardly any of them speak English or care for English. They have their own language and they are very comfortable in their own language. And there are many countries which are adjusting to it. In Australia, Chinese is rapidly becoming the second language of choice for students. In France, very xenophobic or very patriotic France, very nationalistic France, they use 3 languages in the Charles de Gaulle airport. French, of course, English, and then Chinese. So that the French have recognized the value of using the Chinese language to attract Chinese visitors and to make France more comfortable for the Chinese visitors. We need to learn some lessons from that. And then, of course, food and alcohol. Chinese love their own food, their own alcohol. I don't think there are many places in Sri Lanka where anyone can go and enjoy a genuine Chinese meal. Of course, there are many Chinese restaurants which serve Sri Lankan Chinese meals. We love it, we enjoy it, but I don't think the Chinese do. So we need to think about that aspect as well, the language, and then becoming familiar with Chinese customs, culture, etc. We tend to, again, treat visitors from the East, whether they're Japanese, Chinese, Koreans, the same way we treat or don't treat the visitors from the West. I think there's a different attitude, there's a different cultural approach that we need to adopt. So those are the 3 economically important aspects that I would like to deal with as ambassador. Of course, there's another very important element. I will have to be consciously aware of all the time as a bilateral relationship. We've had a very long-standing bilateral relationship with China. These 2 countries in the same region have been close to each other for almost 2 millennia. Thousands of years ago, Chinese sailors came to Sri Lanka, and Sri Lankan sailors went to China There's a plaque in the Hong Kong Maritime Museum which says that the biggest ships that came into that harbor in the days gone by, in the centuries gone by, were from Lanka. Some of those ships were 3 stories high. So Lankan sailors went to China just as much as Chinese sailors came here. The relationship was very good. And then Sri Lankan monks went to China. The famous Chinese monk, Fa Xian, came and stayed 6 years in Sri Lanka. The records he kept have been very helpful for us to work out what Sri Lanka was like in the 6th century. In fact, Fa Xian tends to corroborate many of the things that we find in our own Mahavansa. He lived in Abhayagiri temple, and he left extensive records of Sri Lanka, and some of which still has not been translated into a language that we are familiar with. The Chinese, the Bhikkhuni order, with the order of nuns, was established by Sri Lankan monks who went to China. Parakramabahu, the great, sent a princess to the court of the great Khan. So there were those linkages over the years, and they were very solid linkages. It may not be accidental that in Sinhala we refer to martial arts as China Adi. So that might not be a pure coincidence. It might be because we learned martial arts from China. Then again, in more recent times, during the colonial period, when China was suffering enormously from the impact of colonialism, many Chinese scattered around the world looking for a better life. And some of those Chinese came to Sri Lanka as well. And in addition to being dental mechanics, they also engaged themselves in other professions. I knew those who were at St. Thomas's with me, who played rugby and who went into various professions afterwards. In fact, today, one of the leading chefs in Australia, highly decorated chef, he's been awarded many things by the Australian government and the community. Jimmy Shue is a Sri Lankan-born Chinese, now doing extremely well in Australia. So we had them. We had that sort of people-to-people connection as well. More recently, the bilateral relationship between the two governments has been extremely warm. During the time of Mrs. Bandaranaike, China and Sri Lanka became very close friends. And then, as you will recall, during the conflict with the terrorist LTTE, China was one country that never let us down, while our other friends tended to shy away or look in the other direction, especially towards the end of the conflict. China stepped up onto the plate and helped us enormously. It could be said that if not for the Chinese assistance at the time, the war may not have been concluded at the time we did so. Following the end of the conflict, China also provided enormous amounts of investments and financial assistance to Sri Lanka. Today we have many things to show for it: highways, harbors, airports, and other infrastructure projects, all the result of Chinese assistance to Sri Lanka during that difficult period when we were looking for assistance and our other friends not being willing to come to our aid. China did come to our aid at the time. Even after COVID-19 reached pandemic stage, and China had its own problems, but it was one of the first countries that provided assistance to us was China. So I think what is important to recognize is that the two countries have had a very strong relationship, and now we need to build upon it and make it a relationship that will be a permanent feature in our international connections. Of course, when I talk about China in this fashion, it doesn't mean in any sense that we will be exclusively China's friend. Sri Lanka will be friends with everyone. In fact, we will welcome friendships. But China will remain a good friend and a highly valued friend in the future as well.
Thank you
Do you
very
want me to
much,
say?
Doctor. Thank you very much. I think it was fantastic. We really got an understanding of how we are going to look at your new challenge, and there's so much of negativity whenever we watch TV or when we read the papers, but you know, it's so nice to hear so much of promise that youngsters can look at. um, uh, I'm just wondering, when President invited you to be the ambassador to the to Sri Lanka's embassy in China, Doctor, I mean, you had nicely retired and you were enjoying Matale. What did you feel?
At first, I was in two minds because I was enjoying my home in Aleppo, in fact, in the Matale district. I was having a very good time. It was a relaxing time, out in the open, surrounded by hills, a lot of greenery around me. And then this prospect of going to a metropolis, a massive metropolis, and also being told to shoulder the burden of managing a bilateral relationship of enormous importance to Sri Lanka. I hesitated for a moment, but only for a moment, because I like a challenge. And this is the type of challenge I would enjoy. And personally, without exaggeration, I think to me, going to China is like, in a sense, like realizing a long held ambition. And even when I started my career, I thought of being posted to China. This is many, many years ago. But that didn't happen. Instead, I was posted to almost every other place that people were eager to go to other than to China. So it's towards the end of my career, being able to go to China is like being rewarded for years of hard work.
Doctor, I mean, this is not the first time you've been picked by a president to shoulder a challenge for Sri Lanka. I remember in 2007, once again, you were picked from the US at that time. And I think you were in the UN at that time. You were picked and you were asked to head the government peace secretariat. And I remember how we used to go to Wakare, and we used to travel by helicopter along the railway line because you couldn't go above the treetops because it was dangerous. What is your purpose that you that this kind of drive, selfless drive, comes, Doctor?
I think, well, in 2006, when President Mahinda Rajapaksa invited me to come back home, as you quite rightly said, I was having a wonderful time in New York. I was head of the treaties section of the United Nations. I enjoyed the international recognition, not to mention the financial benefits that came with it. But this was a time when many expatriates would gather around and try to solve Sri Lanka's problems on a Saturday night over many bottles of expensive wine. And then, of course, they'll forget all about that, go to work on Monday. And nothing would change in Sri Lanka. when I was offered this opportunity to try to participate in the efforts to solve Sri Lanka's terrorist problems, I grabbed it because for me, this was a challenge that I had always dreamt of. And here it was being offered to me on a platter. Of course, the sacrifice I had to make, if you could describe it as a sacrifice, was fairly significant. Financially, security-wise, comfort-wise, etc. But after all, I was being asked to do this for the land of my birth. And in that respect, there was no hesitation in my mind. I was given this task, I was given this challenge to serve the country that nurtured me as a youth, and I was willing to take that. I came back. And then, as you know, very well know, those were difficult times physically in Sri Lanka. My deputy, Kechish Loganathan, was shot on his doorstep after they had tried to find him in the Peace Secretariat the previous day. I myself was threatened more than once. But what had to be done, had to be done. And I did it, and you and others in the office helped as well. We were in Wakare a week after Wakare was liberated, and the surrounding countryside was still occupied by the LTT. Only the town was in the government hands. But we flew in there and flew, as you rightly recall, we had to fly at treetop level because the missiles, heat-seeking missiles, couldn't latch onto a helicopter at that height. And then, of course, at regular intervals, I saw the pilot letting off flares, just in case a stray missile was aimed at us. But we went through it, and then the rewards were enormous. The country ended the terrorist threat that had plagued it for 27 years. And I'm glad that I managed to play a small part in that exercise.
Thank you, Doctor. Doctor, can you take us back to your university days? Because there are a lot of MBA graduates, youngsters listening. They say that the most enjoyable time is at university. Can you tell us a little bit about your university life, please?
I don't know whether it was the most enjoyable time in my life, but certainly it was a liberating time. For the first time, I was out of the home and managing my own affairs to a large extent than before, because at home you had to maintain a certain discipline, adhere to the rules of the house, and the parents were always there keeping an eye on you. But here, for the first time, you were responsible for yourself. So at the university, at least I, played a couple of sports fairly seriously for the first time. I played cricket, I played hockey. I also engaged in some student politics, but I also studied very hard, mixed it all up. Some of my colleagues in the same class have done extremely well. The former Prime Minister of this country was in my class at the time. And then there were others who have done well in their lives. Anil Vitana, who became the chairman of the America Arab Shipping Line, Maitri Panagoda, who is currently one of the top civil lawyers in Australia, and the holder of the Order of Australia award. And there were many others like that. And it was a good time. There was a lot of competition amongst us, but I believe that we also had a good time. And many of us did well with ourselves in later life. So if there's a message that I can convey to the youngsters of today, it is that remain focused, know what you want, and pursue your dream with a lot of vigor and commitment. At the same time, don't miss out on life. There are things that if you don't do today, you'll never get the chance to do again, whether it's playing a sport or playing music, learning to play music, or writing poetry or whatever. If you have a dream, follow it. Don't miss out on life. Because if you wait till tomorrow to do the things that you want to do today, or you can do today, you will never get that opportunity. And then it's the same thing I could say about my master's degree in Australia. I went to Australia on an Australian National University scholarship, not a government scholarship, but a private scholarship awarded by the ANU. Again, I did the same things there. I worked very hard on my master's degree, which had to be completed in 18 months. I also, for the first time, played cricket at a high level in Australia. I was in one of the top teams in Canberra. I played hockey again, and then did many things that in Sri Lanka we don't have the opportunity to do. I learned to ski, I learned to surf. Then following that, I went to Cambridge to do my PhD, again on a grant. That I would say was the happiest student days of my life. Cambridge was a dream come true. I had always wanted to go to Cambridge or Oxford, and here I was there at last. I played a lot of sports, I socialized a lot, and then also managed in the process to get a PhD. As you pointed out earlier, it was published by Kluwer International in the Netherlands, and they sold that, sold a copy of that at the time at 150 guilders, which was a lot of money. And I managed to get only 8% of the 150 guilders a copy. But I think all the expenses I incurred, studying, private expenses I incurred, were compensated for by the 8 guilders for copy. But this was a very happy time for me, a very challenging time. And also, Cambridge is a place where you are constantly in contact with intellectual giants, giants who have invented things, discovered things, made contributions to human knowledge in some form or other, or those who have contributed to the arts, the sports. A former captain of the English cricket team was a friend of mine who was playing for one of the colleges just as I was. Mike Really. And Tony Gregg's brother was a contemporary of mine. So it was a good time. And of course, I did not let, as I said earlier, there were opportunities galore, and I did not let them escape me. I always grabbed at the opportunities as they came along.
So, Doctor, I mean, it's very strange, but did you ever think that a boy from Matale is going to be the Secretary of the Foreign Ministry, driving the whole foreign policy for the country? I mean, did you ever dream of that when you were studying?
I had a couple of dreams. I think my dreams are bigger than just being the Foreign Secretary. It's just that I didn't realize that they were probably more centered on the United Nations. I always wanted to work for the United Nations. In fact, I applied to the United Nations as soon as I completed my PhD. Of course, I wasn't selected. That wasn't good enough. And then what I did was I worked for 10 years and then applied laterally. Of course, by that time, with my academic background and my experience, I suppose the UN couldn't just dismiss me and chase me away and tell me to go and find another job. I was recruited to the head office to run the treaty section. That was, but maybe at the back of my mind somewhere, I may have wanted to become a diplomat. As to whether I actually wanted to be the Foreign Secretary, I'm not sure at that time. But later on, I thought, this is the job I wanted, and I could do it well. And I hope that I did satisfied the expectations of those who appointed me, especially President Mahinda Rajapaksa.
So, Doctor, will you like to tell us a very special moment, because you work at a different level when you're Secretary Foreign Ministry? Yeah, any memorable moment you like to share with us?
There are many memorable moments, especially those in my confrontations with the CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, and others. I remember one evening I got a call from New York. Miley, the anchor for PBS, was on the line, and he asked me whether I would like to make a few comments on the situation in Sri Lanka, because on the other line was the rapper Mia, a Sri Lankan-born rapper. Arul Prakasam was her name, and she was very popular at the time in the West, especially in New York. And she was an ardent supporter, unquestioning supporter of the LTTE. And then she was on the other line. She went on and on about what was going on in Sri Lanka. So I listened to it for a while, and then I stopped her. And I stopped the commentator and told him, look, I like Mia's music very much. I think she's a great musician, a great singer. But one thing, I have a little bit of advice for her. She should stay with her music and leave politics to adults. And I think that broke her up, and she couldn't continue any further.
Oh, yeah. Actually, Doctor, during that time, you were head of the government peace secretariat, and you were doing the foreign ministry job together. I remember, and then we sat and we developed the PR on that. Doctor, how do you see this global pandemic? I mean, there are very few people that we can really talk to. I mean, 60 million people affected, 1.4 million dead. I mean, Sri Lanka is somewhat better because, you know, our fatality rate is only 0.3%. Doctor, how should the youngster look at this pandemic?
I believe that this is a serious problem, and we should take it very seriously. We cannot treat the pandemic lightly. Those countries which have taken very strong measures, stringent measures to deal with it, have done extremely well. Look at New Zealand. Australia is also faring not too badly. And for the longest while, Sri Lanka was doing extremely well. In fact, Sri Lanka might still be one of the better performers in the world, although we are beginning to worry about the growing numbers. I believe that this is something that is not going to go away overnight. Even with a vaccine, we may still have to deal with it. We'll need to take all the precautions which the government has advised and our health authorities have advised us to take. Wash your hands, wear your mask, use sanitizer as frequently as possible, and maintain the distances. I think we need to do all that in order to ensure that we do not distribute this to the entire population. We need to keep as many people healthy as possible. We do not know much about the long-term consequences of this illness. So until such time that we understand this illness better, this virus better, we need to take the necessary precautions. But at the same time, there are things that we can do to make the world a different place. Now, already in the developed countries, working from home has become almost the norm. People don't go to offices anymore. They do their work from home. And it is possible to do much of the stuff that we did in offices earlier from home now with the use of a laptop or a desktop computer. Why not get used to that? We can conduct, and now the two of us, we're talking to each other, but we are not in the same room. We are separated by quite a distance, and we are talking to each other quite coherently and in a convincing manner. We must get used, I think increasingly, we have to get used to this method of doing business. This is the future of the world. So the sooner we master the technology, and it's not difficult to master, I think we can move with the developed world or into the developed world better. Those countries which do not adopt these changes will still lag behind and will continue to complain about the digital divide. We don't need to complain about the digital divide because it's very easy to cross that divide at the moment. So working from home, working away from big buildings will have other benefits. The crowded cities will be a thing of the past. People will not be driving or taking a bus or a train to go to work. Instead, they will be doing it from home. For that, of course, we need to have better infrastructure, better digital infrastructure. And that is something that governments will have to focus on in the future. Provide better connectivity, not only at workplaces, not only in cities, but in the rural areas as well, so that people could do what they want to do from where they live rather than congregate in cities and gather in large numbers. We don't have to do that. We can buy and sell online now. In fact, in China, online selling has become such a huge business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, and it's very successful. In the US, it is catching on. In Europe, it's catching on. Online buying and selling. So trade can happen online. Business conversations, discussions can happen online. So we need to get as many people as possible used to the idea of communicating with each other online. So this is the bright side of COVID-19. We are being forced to enter the world of tomorrow, today itself. 2 or 3 years ago, we would still look upon this as tomorrow's possibility. Today, it's not tomorrow's possibilities, it is yesterday's possibility. So we need to move into that era as quickly as possible if we are to keep abreast of the developed world. Schooling, the same thing. In Australia, in America, in Britain, in France, Germany, schooling now takes place from home. Lessons are given online. And you might say that, but that is not the same thing as being in a class. Of course it is not. You don't have, the classroom concept is centuries old. We gather the youngsters within 4 walls, and then there is somebody distributing knowledge sitting at the top of the class. Instead of that teacher sitting up there in front, could have a computer screen. It's the same thing. Of course, you can't now, when you write answers, you won't have your neighbor to copy from. You'll have to do it yourself. So that will be a disadvantage. But on the whole, we must get used to this idea of providing lessons online. And of course, you might complain that in the villages, we don't have this infrastructure. That is something that we can provide very quickly, relatively cheaply, if we make up our minds. There are so many things we spend our money on, of assets, funds on. We can do this. Every house these days has a television screen. Many houses have desktop computers, if not laptop computers. It's only a matter of changing the mindset of the policymakers and ensuring that knowledge is distributed online rather than by teachers sitting in front of classrooms. That's the second thing. And then, of course, travel, for example. We don't need brochures anymore to find out where we wish to travel to. 2 or 3 years ago, the brochure was the thing to go and look for when you were thinking of traveling somewhere. Now, all that information and more can be provided much more cheaply online. And in fact, as I said earlier, in China, when you need something, you go online. When you want to travel somewhere, you go online. That is the place where you obtain your information. Financial transactions are now conducted online. Again, I have to use China as an example because currency, the paper currency or coins have almost become a thing of the past in China. Almost every payment is made using a QR code on your cell phone. This is how payments are made. That is the world of today in China. And we must make it the world of tomorrow for us. And we need to move into that world as quickly as possible because we don't want to be left behind yet again by a few countries monopolizing technology. We need to keep abreast. And this can be done relatively easily, in my view. You just need dreamers and people with vision running policy and then allocating the resources, necessary resources for this purpose. It can be done. And I am a fervent advocate of the digital revolution. And we need to enter this revolution with enthusiasm so that our next generation, that's the generation after me and you, will be part of the developed world, thinking along those lines and achieving results along those lines. I also think that poverty, which has become our birthright in this country, will become a thing of the past.
Thank you very much, Doctor. It was lovely talking to you. And it's actually an honor to listen to you. Whenever we listen to you speak, it just tells you why the president wanted you to head one of the most powerful countries in the world and one of the most important countries in the world for us in the current next 5 years. So I think it's actually been a real honor. I'd like to just ask Kaushali to ask a few questions, I think, which has come from the net online. Kaushali, over to you. Doc, it's absolutely fantastic meeting you again.
Thank you, Doctor. Yes, Your Excellency, it was amazing to have listened to you. Two perspectives for me personally. That is on behalf of the students, of course, rather than just the knowledge in the book. It was amazing to hear how the practicality works and how you can give that input to a youngster. So I myself am inspired after having listened to you. So thank you very much for that. And then secondly, it was nice to see the Sri Lankan spirit, embedded in you for some reason. Even in the personality, even in the speech, and of course, other than that, being an amazing human being, having to deal with so many titles and so many designations, you still manage to be absolutely humble. And that's a very wonderful session and a wonderful experience for our students, I believe, in the human aspect. So thank you so much for that. So we have a pile of questions coming in, but I'm going to line them up in a way where we would answer collaboratively. So we have the first area that were coming up is Sri Lankans were able to finish or rather overcome these rivalries and then the terrorism that was going on. However, in your personal opinion, what do you think the main reason that we are struggling in terms of humanistic development?
I think in every country, every individual has certain ambitions, goals, aspirations. Every individual wants to be treated with dignity. Every individual wishes to be given similar opportunities like everyone else. Every individual has those innermost feelings of wanting to achieve something somewhere. I think as a country, we need to give those opportunities to our people. Once we make these opportunities available, I think it will be less likely that ambitious politicians will be able to exploit the shortcomings in what we give our people for their own benefit. I personally think that the major problem in this country is not the average individual, the whatever ethnic background that individual comes from, or religious background, or social background even, but it is the greed of certain politicians to exploit what is lacking for their own purposes. So what I would suggest is that let's make an effort as a people to give everyone the dignity that they deserve, the opportunities that they aspire to, and the freedom that they would like to enjoy.
Wonderful. So moving on to the next question. Your Excellency, we do have a concern about a little bit of a diplomatic management in terms of continents. So in your perspective, what are the strategies that you would be expected to apply in terms of balancing the Indian factor within your effort to improve the trade with China as well?
That's a hugely challenging question. I think first and foremost, we need to ensure that India's security concerns are met. India rightfully recognizes itself as a regional power with regional security interests. India has genuine interests around the Indian Ocean region. And we should never place ourselves in a position where India's security interests are threatened. We should not let anyone else use Sri Lanka for that purpose either. And I believe that it's possible to do that. And after all, India has been a neighbor, a relative, and an inspiration for 2.5 millennia. It's from India that we got most of our culture, our religions, our languages even. And so those intrinsic bonds are there between the two countries. So we also must ensure that in the modern world, India's legitimate security interests are not threatened by us or by anyone else using us. And then of course, moving away from that, there are other countries which are interested in Sri Lanka. And as the president has repeatedly said, we welcome friends to come into our country, but not at the expense of our sovereignty, our independence, and our territorial integrity. We fought for far too long to safeguard those elements, and we will continue to fight to safeguard those elements. China is another very important neighbor in our wider region, and China is also the country that has the wherewithal to assist us in our development efforts, and we need to develop fast if we are to satisfy the aspirations of our people. China is also the country that is the biggest marketplace in the world today, and we need to access that market in a more strategic and better thought out manner. And as I explained earlier, China is also the main source of global tourism. So China can play more than one role as we seek to climb up the development ladder. China did it on its own, and we could seek China's assistance as we go up as well. We can do some of these things on our own, but in the modern world, you need to have friends outside who are willing to help you along. That is why we need to keep the Chinese relationship as warm as possible as well. That is not to say that China and India are the only two countries that we need to be friendly with. We need to be friends with all, as many as possible, and ensure that they all respect our need to preserve our independence, our integrity, and our territorial integrity.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And with that, the last question, I shall tell you, so many concerns and questions have come about how you spent your young life, and what are the attributes that you like to, and then what are the memories that you can recall. So a lot of concerns relating to that, but I believe I captured the right question to ask you covering all. So which which self do you love the most? Do you like your schooling self, or do you like your undergraduate, or do you like the diplomat right now that you're living, or the retirement that you enjoyed just before you get posted?
And that's the most difficult question you asked me, because
I believe I captured everyone's concerns and interests.
sometimes I've confused myself, because I enjoyed being a diplomat, I enjoyed being a student. I also had a wild part in me, which did not find opportunity to express itself most of the time, because when you're at school, you had to be disciplined. When you're at university, you had degrees to work towards. And then as a diplomat, that you have to maintain, you are the public face of your country, so therefore you have to maintain the dignity of your country in your personality. So all those things are there, but there is also a wild self part of my life. I am the type of person who had never seen snow before, but during my 3.5 years in Geneva, I learned to ski down steep mountain slopes, icy mountain slopes. Then on one occasion, when I was told to return home, instead of flying home, I took the train home. Nobody else has done that before. Or at least in modern times. I traveled all the way from Geneva to Beijing by train overland across Russia. Then more recently, this was during my days hiding away in Aleppo, I decided with a friend to travel to Antarctica. You might ask, why Antarctica of all places, the frozen continent? Because I suppose it was there and I wanted to go there. So there's that aspect to my life as well. There are things that I aspired to do, which many other people wouldn't think of doing. And then I believe that those things added a little bit to my life's experience, which I look back upon with a great deal of joy.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doctor. Appreciate sincerely, and I'd like to give the final question to Bandula to ask. Bandula, please. Mute.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay. Sorry. Excellency, first of all, thank you very much being with us, and also not only being with us, basically sharing your very, very valuable and very inspiring stories and the vision that you shared with us. I also believe the exceptional people give exceptional results. When you are listening to you, you are being an exceptional man who is giving exceptional returns. So we are very, very inspired. So this is also a little bit of an exceptional question for you. It's not a question, it's a comment. Sir, we know that, whoever who is assigned as the ambassador, they have two different aspects as a challenge. This is common for everyone. When you posted there in the China, I think that the main integral part is, one is the political diplomacy, other one is the trade diplomacy. So how do you look at it? That basically, I know that political diplomacy is somewhat favorable for Sri Lanka, but listening to your story, that means that you have a lot of things to do in trade. So how do you balance that in the political diplomacy and trade diplomacy? And I'm not asking you a game plan, but still I just want to like to hear from you. What's your next steps?
Like in life, in diplomacy also, or in trade, nothing comes easy. So you need to work hard at it. Diplomacy, to get the relationship between the two countries to the current level, I don't think was ever easy, but we worked at it and we established that relationship on a solid foundation, and we can bring it to a higher level. And I hope that we'll be able to do that in the coming months, years. Similarly, with trade, there is a tendency on the part of many people to just sit back and hope for the best. In today's world, nothing happens if you don't work towards it. We need to work hard. We need to work strategically. We need to think carefully as to what we can do, what we can achieve with regard to trade and China. China is there like a goose laying golden eggs, but we need to approach that goose to collect those eggs. We need to approach that goose carefully and with a strategy in mind. And it's not only the government that can do it. In fact, the government can do only so much and no more. Our private sector must become very proactive, very professional, and approach the Chinese market. Just to give you an example, last month there was the Shanghai import expo, international import expo. Sri Lanka had only about, well, with a great deal of effort, I managed to get something like 35 Sri Lankan exporters to be present there, despite the fact that we had every facility provided to us by the government, of Chinese government. On the other hand, Australia, with which China is now at loggerheads, they are literally calling each other names and banning each other's products from each other's market. There were 200 companies, Australian companies, present at that expo, because the private sector recognized that despite the political problems that the two countries are being affected with at the moment, the private sector had opportunities to exploit, and they were there in large numbers. In fact, the private sector can, in many situations, be the back door or the bridge to solving political problems. So that is an example where those companies recognized that whatever was happening in the political arena, it was more important for them to access the Chinese market and make the best of it and use the opportunity provided. And they were there. So I think Sri Lankan companies need to be more proactive, more strategic, and work hard at it to enter the Chinese market and benefit from it.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you very much for the insightful answers that you have given. So, on behalf of entire APIT, we wish you very, very safe journey. And most probably when you are settled down in China, we're happy to see you there in China with the right time.
I look forward to your visit. I look forward to your visit.
Of course, sir. All the very best. Take care, sir. Take care very much. I mean, thank you very much for everything. Dr. Rohanta, over to you.
Thank you very much,
sir.
Doctor.
Glad to have been here.
It's an honor to host you. I appreciate, Doctor. God bless you.
Of course, it's such an honor to have co-host you with the panel. And this brings us to an end of another webinar. Just not another webinar, but then of course a wonderful experience, wonderful connection. And this is all about networking for you, dear students. So take the maximum, take your lives ahead, and all of you have all our blessings. So we would like to see you back again in another webinar. And with that, good night. And we will see you back again soon.
Good night.